Hello and welcome to the afternoon sessions. As you know, I'm Catherine Molonga. I'm a Development Support Manager for Hub Cymru Africa, and I'm pleased to introduce to you the Meet the Funder and Meet the Arts and Culture Funders session this afternoon. My colleague Julian, who's also a Development Support Manager with Hub Cymru Africa, is going to chair the session, so he'll introduce the speakers. But really quickly, I just want to give you some housekeeping. On your right-hand side of the tab, along this side, you'll see a chat box function and a question and answer function. So please do feel free to put your comments and thoughts into the chat function. But if you have specific questions that you want to ask any of our panelists today, please do click on the question and answer bit before you put in your questions, and then we'll be able to see them. I also wanted to say that you will see a poll during the session, and again, that's on the right-hand side. We'll draw your attention to it when it's time, but that's just a simple yes/no survey. This is a brave space, not a safe space. We welcome conversation, we welcome challenge, but nobody's lived experience is up for debate. So we will not tolerate any kind of racism, prejudice, or any abuse, and you will be removed from the session. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm going to hand over to Julian. Sorry, everyone. It does look like maybe we've lost Julian. I'm really sorry about that. So I will carry on. The first person who's going to be speaking today is Natasha Nichols. Natasha Nichols works for everyone's clapping. Thanks for the cheers, everybody. It's not an online event without a technical issue, is it? Okay, so Natasha, please, will you go ahead and introduce yourself? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kath. Hello, everyone. I'm Natasha. It's really great to be here with you this afternoon. I'm a white woman in my 40s with long hair, blue cardigan and glasses on. Behind me is my temporary home office space, which isn't so temporary anymore. And I'm the interim head of arts for the British Council in Wales. British Council is the UK's international organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities, and we work in over 120 countries across the world. Our team in Wales does that by connecting those countries with the arts and education sectors in Wales. Traditionally, the British Council hasn't been a funding body, or at least that's the answer that we've always had to give when people come to us and ask for funding. But in the last couple of years, we have been able to be starting to offer some more kind of regular funding programme opportunities. The largest of which, or the first large one really, was the Digital Collaboration Fund, which we launched in response to the pandemic in the summer of 2020. And that was really aimed at supporting online and virtual collaborations between UK organisations and their international counterparts. The response to that was overwhelming. I think we had about 900 applications. And as you can imagine, that's a huge amount to wade through, even for a large organisation such as the British Council. So it really got us talking as an internal team about what that meant for the sector and what the sector really needed from us. So the next step for us then was to launch the International Collaboration Programme, which we managed to do in October last year. It seems like a long time ago, but really it wasn't. That was, maybe 3 months ago. And that was approximately about £4 million programme of grants to support UK and overseas arts and cultural organisations to collaborate together. Unlike the Digital Collaboration Programme, this ICP, International Collaboration Programme, wasn't just aimed at digital or virtual projects. You could apply for a digital or virtual project, but you could also apply for face-to-face or hybrid. And we did that because we felt that where we were during the pandemic at the time, people were moving forward, people were moving away from just looking at digital, and they were really looking towards the future and really exploring what that future was. There were about 40 eligible countries on the list to work with the UK, and that's largely to do with where the priorities in terms of the money is, so where we were allowed to spend our money. A lot of that money does need to be spent in what we call ODA countries, which is overseas development assisted countries, and that's most of sub-Saharan Africa, some of South America and South Asia, but there was also a pot for Europe and wider Europe, and countries like that. We split the programme into small and large grants, and the small grants you could apply for between £5,000 and £20,000, and the larger grants were between £20,000 and £75,000. So over the last 3 months, we have been looking at, as I say, it was roughly about 900 applications again for this programme. And what's really become apparent was what's been exciting about those grants. The ones for me personally that were exciting were the ones that showed new ways of working, or who had engaged with partners who British Council had never engaged with before. And that quite often meant that one of the partners hadn't worked internationally or at a really early stage of their international journey. So that was really exciting, because not only did you get to see some completely different perspectives, but you got to see a fresh view of how the sector really needed us to be supporting them during this time. The ones that were artist-led were really, really exciting for me and for British Council as a whole. The fund was only able to be applied to by organisations. And that was simply a logistical thing, that we couldn't manage to give out so many grants to individuals. But what we tried to do was encourage organisations to work with artists locally and internationally, to make sure that they weren't just a byproduct of the application, that they were there in the planning, in the delivery, in the audience engagement. And some of the ways that people have done that have been incredible. For example, we've had applications using audiences on ships, audiences in football stadiums, artists who were collaborating virtually through sign language, and it's been really, really exciting to see that. One of the things that I know we wanted to kind of cover today was kind of red flags for applications. And this is a really tough one, because a lot of effort goes into every application. We really understand that. And particularly if you're an individual or a small organisation who perhaps haven't had much experience of putting together applications, you do spend a lot of time working on these. So what I really like to try and do today, and with Jenny, who's speaking after me, is to maybe give you a taste of what we're looking for in applications and what you need to be thinking really, really carefully about. It's often quite clear to us when partners have just gotten together with a pre-existing idea, and they've just gone to a partner and said, we need a partner in such and such a country to work with. It's really clear when that happens, because the project really only serves one partner. The objectives only really serve one partner or one location. So my first piece of advice would be to really, really develop those partnerships, develop those conversations before putting in an application. And quite often that means not responding to an application programme, but having those conversations really naturally and organically over time, so that when the opportunities do come round, you are in a really good position. One of the other red flags, especially for British Council, is there seems to be a misconception that British Council only want the benefit to be in the non-UK country. And that's not the case. Or while we do look for at least a 50-50 split of money and of activity, the benefit really does need to be mutual. We want to see both partners, both locations, both countries as benefiting through the project. So it's really important that the project isn't just about finding another place to do a project, or another artist to take part in the project, that it really does respond to what's being asked of. I think I'm running out of time here, so luckily I'm nearly finished. Then the other major thing for us is when the activity isn't clear. And sometimes I think applications try and mask this with kind of unnecessarily complex language. So activity and a timeline that's really, really clear and concise and as to the point as you can make it, I think is a real benefit and a real advantage when you've got somebody who may be reading kind of 40 to 50 applications from similar organizations or similar art forms. So, you know, hopefully over the next kind of hour or so, or half an hour, how long we've got, we can give you a better idea of the types of projects and that type of partnership that we're looking for. Thank you.
Hello. Am I now on screen? And can you hear me? Amazing. That's exciting. So thank you very much for that, Natasha. That was delivered perfectly to time. So we're picking up a little bit of time, which is really good. If people have got questions, and if people do have questions, then please start to put them in the question and answer box. I'll be picking some questions out of there and putting them to Natasha and to our next speaker, Jenny, in a few minutes. So next of all, then we do have Jenny Stoves, and Jenny is a development officer with the Arts Council of Wales. And brilliant. Jenny, please go for it. Jenny, I think you're on mute and your video is off. You may need to press the little video camera and microphone icons. Fantastic.
Wonderful. Hello. Sorry, the joys of Zoom. You'd think I'd be used to it by now after all of this time, but still forgetting to put myself off mute. Apologies. And thank you. Yes, I'm Jenny Stoves and I'm a development officer working at the Arts Council of Wales, usually in our Cardiff office, but for the past almost 2 years working from home in my house in Splot. I'm a white, middle-aged woman with brown hair, which is down today. And I will stop talking about myself and get on to what you want to actually know about. As I say, I work at the Arts Council, and my job at the Arts Council involves supporting artists and arts organisations to access funding to help develop their work and deliver projects for the benefit of audiences and the public in Wales. I don't know how much you already know about the Arts Council, so I'm going to start off assuming that you don't know who we are or what we do, and just give you a little bit of background. We're a charity that distributes arts funding from both the Welsh Government and National Lottery funding. Most of the open access funds are actually National Lottery funds, and I will get on and talk about that in a few minutes. Most of our funding goes to artists and arts organisations who are carrying out programmes of work across Wales, and our aim is to make the arts central to the life and well-being of our nation. We try and work in ways that are open and transparent and accessible. We're on a journey as to how well we're achieving that, but we've got two overarching priorities, and these priorities cut across everything that we do, including our funding. The first priority is focused on equalities, diversity, and the Welsh language, and increasing the work that we fund, the people that we engage with from a diversity of backgrounds. The second priority is really about our investment in artists in the arts sector. It's about nurturing creative talent and or promoting the sustainability and resilience of the sector. There are a few different types of funding that you may be able to access, which can support international arts projects. I'll start with the most obvious. We have a team based at the Arts Council. It's an agency of the Arts Council of Wales called Wales Arts International. And you'll meet my colleague Eluned a little bit later, who'll be talking more about their work. But they work in close partnership with Welsh Government and with the British Council. And they provide advice and support to artists and arts organisations from Wales who work internationally. They're the main contact point as well for artists, international artists and arts organisations wanting to connect with Wales. Through its work, it creates opportunities for Welsh artists to develop their practice and careers and ambitions through international working. They help develop and enrich artistic practice, careers and ambition through this international working. They help to grow new global opportunities for arts and culture in Wales. And they invest in artistic collaborations that inspire and connect people in diverse communities in Wales. Their main funding route is called the International Opportunities Fund. And that's open both to arts organisations and to individuals. Or I say it's open. It's not actually open at the moment, but it's due to reopen in April 2022. So really for projects from sort of May, June onwards. You can apply for up to £5,000 and the turnaround for decision making is quite quick. There's a 6-week turnaround. And the purpose of that fund is to support the development of relationships, collaborations and networks between Wales's creative professionals and arts organisations and international partners. It's really important that if you're submitting an application to Wales Arts International, you have established some kind of link with that international partner that you want to develop further. It aims to enable people to share experiences and skills through the arts within an international context, and also to raise the profile of Wales and its connections through the arts internationally. At the moment, it has 2 priorities. One is around the development and testing of new ideas and new ways of working in collaboration with international partners, always with a view to longer term international partnerships, which are mutually beneficial. I think that's something that's really important. The types of partnerships that you want to involve need to focus more than just on that project that you want to deliver with the project that you're applying for. So really trying to build connections over time and enabling us to see that there's some kind of legacy to what you're doing, and impact of the project beyond the period that you're delivering it. And we're looking really to support projects that are about shared learning, making connections, experiencing things that are mutually beneficial through that international exchange, which picks up on some of the points really I think that my my British Council colleague was talking about before me. The other route of funding is more for projects that have an international element, but the main activity is happening in Wales. And the main beneficiaries are the public of Wales. The main funding support programme we have at the moment is called Create. And you can apply to that fund at 2 different levels, up to 10,000, where you again get a decision within 6 weeks, and applications for up to £50,000 usually. Again, it's open to organisations and individual artists. And it's focused on the development and creation of high quality arts experiences that help creative individuals and organisations engage with and connect to the public. That public engagement is really important. It can't just be a project that an artist wants to do, working in isolation without that public benefit reach. it is about providing opportunities for artists to present their work in public spaces. But it can include research and development, so the stages of the project where an applicant has an audience in mind already, or participants in mind already, but they're just researching their ideas before it gets to that public presentation or sharing stage. It can include community engagement work and participatory activity, and it can also include professional development and training. Within this, there can be international elements. So, for example, you may have a Wales-based project that has an international connection. So perhaps bringing in an international artist to work with your participants in delivering some activity, or it might be about it could be about projects that are led in partnership with international communities, but those projects are actually happening in Wales. And it could be a project that's led within Wales that include the participation of an international artist or a company. Examples could be building your knowledge, skills and capacity in Wales through learning opportunities developed by international organisations. And it could also be that you're showcasing projects that invite the world to Wales in person or digitally to experience arts and culture from Wales. So quite a few different ways. Basically, if there is an international element and it's happening in Wales, you could apply to create. The other fund that I just want to mention briefly, or it's more of a scheme than a fund, is our Night Out scheme, which works in partnership with local authorities and volunteers working in the heart of their communities across Wales. It's a touring presentation fund that enables local communities to be able to afford to bring artists into their communities. So Night Out would support the costs of the fee of that artist. The communities would raise as much money as they could through box office income on the door and pay the artist from a combination of that income and a guarantee against loss, which is provided through the Night Out scheme. I meant to say at the beginning that I will share with you links to the Arts Council's website, Wales Arts International's website and the Night Out website. So you can look into some of this in more detail if you want to. But we're really looking for projects that have that potential impact to have a legacy beyond the project itself. Things that provide opportunities for learning and exchange, thinking about how you can collaborate with others to really take your artwork or your practice forward, sometimes maybe to engage with different communities as well, but looking for those sharing opportunities, sharing ideas, sharing practice, sharing culture. Projects that tend to excite us are the ones that have a really clear focus, where it's really clear what you want to do, why you want to do it, and who it's for, which sounds really simple, but I think sometimes people get a little bit caught up in trying to do everything that we're expecting them to do and don't tell us the basic things about the project, the things that really we're interested in. We're interested in projects where the work itself excites us, where the artists themselves are working in a way that's interesting and exciting and relevant. Maybe they're looking at a theme or exploring an issue in a creative way. And we're particularly interested in hearing the voices of people who aren't often heard and hearing different perspectives. And I think our audiences here in Wales are really interested in that as well. I've also been asked to say, what are the red flags in a funding application? The biggest issue when people are applying for funding usually happens before the application hits our table. We have a criteria that we can't fund projects that have already happened, or you've already committed to delivering before you know whether you've got any funding from the Arts Council. And that includes projects that are already happening on an ongoing basis. So my main message is, please contact us. You can speak to a development officer like myself, or to somebody in the Wales Arts International team. And if you contact us at a really early stage of planning the activity, we can talk through what you want to do, help you work out how it might fit our priorities. We can guide you through the application process, but we can only really do that if you contact us in good time before you want to deliver the project. Similarly, in terms of working in partnership, it is really obvious when people have invited a partner to get on board because our priorities, our application process says you need a partner. We're really looking for partnership for projects that are developed in collaboration, where we can see that there's a shared interest or common goals, and it's really clear how each partner will contribute to delivering the project. And I think that is me done. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jenny. That was really illuminating, really good from both of you. We are getting a couple of questions filtering into the question and answer box. It would be great if you could ask any more, if anybody has got some. I've got a couple, actually. I think I'd start with Natasha, if I could, because I think, Jenny, you addressed quite a bit of this, but for Natasha, it'd be good to find out some of the things that when you look at an application for funding, what are the things that really make your heart sing? That you look at them and think, okay, I'm really enjoying this. This looks like a really good thing. I've just read 15 really terrible applications, but now I'm going to get up and dance around.
I thought you said then, what makes your heart sink?
Oh, well,
that's the other end of the scale. I get really excited when I actually can clearly understand what the application is trying to tell me. I get really sidetracked when I think there's lots of kind of, for a better word, flowery language around things, where there, lots of concepts and lots of ideas are being put forward without kind of rationale. So when I can see a really clear journey between, this is the idea, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is how much we think it's going to cost, these are the challenges we think, when you see a clear journey through an application, that really does make me really happy. In terms of the themes, I really like it when I really love applications which aren't just focused on one art form or one theme, where there's this kind of an open view to the objectives, I guess. So, if you've got some arts organizations who are partnering with STEM organizations or with people who wouldn't normally be engaging with artists or arts organization, that's really exciting, because I feel then that it feels then that you're going to have a completely different perspective on things. That really does make me really excited.
Okay, thank you. And Jenny, any further thoughts? You did cover a little bit about the kind of things that you really liked, but anything else that really gets you excited when you look at an application?
I think it's all those simple, basic things that Natasha has just covered as well. They sound basic, but I think when you're applying for a grant, you can get focused on what you think the funder wants rather than what you really know you want to do, and which if you were talking to your friends, you'd explain really, really clearly. Other things I get excited about. I just love it when somebody's taken a perspective that I just haven't thought of before and maybe exploring something in a really different way, where I get maybe some insight into a different culture or a different mindset. That I think sometimes it's hard to have those conversations outside the framework of the arts, but within the arts it kind of opens up opportunities to talk about things that can be difficult or challenging otherwise. Yeah, I get excited by that. Yeah, political stuff. Yeah.
I always imagine myself being in the audience for these projects, and if I'm going to be, queuing up to buy a ticket on the day that the box office opens, or the day that the film gets released, or whatever the kind of product is, I think that's a really key indicator of a good project. If I'm really, really eager to see it, or to hear about the artist's perspectives, or see the journey, that's always a really good indicator, I think.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. We've got a question from Howard. Howard in Gioconda, Howard has got linked with Zambia. So he is asking, do you have to speak Welsh? And do the artists involved have to speak Welsh in order to access these things? I'm getting clear shaking of heads.
No.
Anything more to say? Is it just a no, you're fine?
No, you don't have to be a Welsh-speaking artist to apply for funding. But we do live in a bilingual nation. So when artists are presenting work to the public, we do expect people in their applications to show us how they would reflect the fact that Wales is a bilingual nation. So we'd expect publicity materials to be bilingual, for example, but the artist applying doesn't need to speak Welsh. Although thinking of examples of projects that have excited me, we funded some projects, one project in particular recently that I can think of, where a sub-Saharan African artist has collaborated with a Welsh-speaking artist, and that was really interesting. Yeah, but you don't have to speak Welsh to apply.
Okay, all right, thank you. We have a question from Claire. And Claire asks, should I put this on screen? Hang on. There you go. Claire asks, what do you think funding will look like in 10 years' time? And who is setting the agenda for you in these discussions? Hardcore question, Claire.
I think that's a really great question. The honest answer is, I don't know, because funding has changed so much even over the last 2 years, because it's been very responsive to what's going on globally. And even if you look pre-pandemic, funding was looking at themes of inclusion, themes of addressing disability, and all of those things, Black Lives Matter and things, although that did happen in the pandemic. So it's changed so much in a relatively short amount of time. I think if I was thinking ideally, then funding would be really altering so that it was about what the artists and what the arts organisations were telling us that they wanted to do. Because it's really heartbreaking, I think, when you have, we do have objectives that are set out by higher up teams in British Council, in my case, from the FCDO, who are the people who give us a lot of the money that we work with. So we tend to have to sometimes, not all the time, toe the line in terms of the countries that they want us to be working in, or the themes that they want us to be addressing. But, you know, because we're such an internationally big organisation, we are able to, let's say, push the boundaries as much as we can with that. But it would be great if funding could, or if at least some of the funding could just be about what the artist and the arts organisation feels like they need to do in order to develop. For British Council, there'll always be an international element. We'll never be able to fund projects that just take place in the UK or in Wales. There will always have to be an international element.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts on that, Jenny?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. I can't answer the first part of that question in terms of what will funding look like in 10 years' time. But I think the second part, in terms of who is setting the agenda, is really interesting, and I think links into a lot of the work and the questioning that we've been doing at the Arts Council over the past few years, but particularly over I would say the past 1 or 2 years, in the light of Black Lives Matter and We Shall Not Be Removed. We've published some documents that are on our website around widening engagement. And I think widening engagement and who is setting the agenda sit really closely together, because if we're going to widen the engagement of people in the arts, we need to include more people in setting the agenda and making decisions about what it is our priorities should be, who we should be, how we work, who makes those decisions, bringing some cultural democracy into the way that we work. I haven't spoken to them about exactly what they're going to say, but I think Eluned and Andrew may well touch on that a little bit more when they speak in a few minutes. But yeah, interesting times. Yeah.
Okay, and who Jenny is setting the agenda for you in those discussions for Arts Council of Wales?
I guess ultimately the agenda is set by our council, but we're working very much on trying to include more people in our decision making. So we've done some work with Disability Arts Cymru. We've reached out to Black and global majority communities. We're paying people to come into some of the discussions that we're having around, well, all of the policies and programs that we're developing. We're trying not to do those in isolation as the Arts Council in our ivory tower, but really to think about how we can engage more people in that planning and decision making. So hopefully what we have to offer as an organisation becomes more relevant to those people. I'm sure Andrew and Eluned will explain it much better than me.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Well, it's about time to move on to Andrew and Eluned. So I'd like to say thank you very much to Jenny and Natasha for being so frank and being so helpful. It's been really useful, but now we will move on to a session with Eluned Haf, and Eluned is the head of Wales Arts International, and Andrew Ogun, who is an agent for change at the Arts Council of Wales. Fantastic. Okay, and they are coming forward. So the idea is that Eluned and Andrew are going to talk about global responsibility, solidarity, and the arts in Wales. This will be a sort of introductory session, as well as having some talking from them now. In the next slot, which is 3 to 3:30, there will be a little open table, so everybody can come along. If you'd like to continue talking about this and continue this session, then there'll be an open table, which will be in I think it's called the main stage debrief table. So I will stop talking and hand over immediately to Eluned to kick us off.
Prynhawn da, good afternoon. I'm Eluned, and I'm really delighted to be here today with Andrew. And I hope we give some thought-provoking ideas, as well as a synopsis of what some of the thinking that's going on both not just within Arts Council of Wales, but the wider conversations with communities throughout Wales, and I would add the world that we are engaging with or have been over the course of a good few years, if not more. I'll just give a bit of a background to our work and the conversations first, and then I'm going to hand over to Andrew, who will bring us hopefully back to where the last conversation finished, which is around who sets the agenda and who takes the decisions and what have you, and things are shifting, as the previous speakers said. Just as I'll try and be brief, because this is a massive conversation and one that I would be delighted to be part of a much longer conversation than what we've got today. But reflecting on what was said this morning by Sean Samuel Mifikela, who I thought was outstanding, and the ideas that we in the Arts Council or in Wales Arts International, British Council, wherever else we may be, are the ones setting the agenda, has to be turned on its head. And we, by listening to people like Sean and artists who are on the ground, connected to the world, working in the locality, but also of global interest, is how these conversations should be said. So to start with, I'd like to say thank you to everyone involved in this conference. It's highly informative, and I am already encouraging people to listen back to some of the conversations I've been listening to. So it's really important. However, a quick run through some of the things that have been going on in the last couple of years. And I in particular want to highlight a sort of a light bulb moment that came in 2018. Which shows the importance of working internationally, whoever you are. And we were at an IETM conference. IETM is one of the largest international network for the performing arts. And the topic of the summit that was held in Portugal then was decolonization. And there was this incredible 10-point plan to decolonize your mind that the most incredible man called Tunder de Fire, who's become a real good friend of Wales since, who was a dramaturg and worked with the Flemish Royal Theatre in Belgium, but is of Nigerian, Swedish and American heritage, which I cannot do justice with, but I will put a link to his speech in the chat. He changed how I saw the world, and these conversations do. And I take it very seriously when I take part in these conversations, to be both open to listen, but also to share what we learn along the way. So they became part of setting up a forum for us in Wales Arts International, which became the first conversations we were having really about decolonisation within the Arts Council. And that feels still like a really important initiative that was taken. But listening back last night, it feels like another era. It's like the pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, pre-Black Lives Matter coming to the fore of everyone's consciousness. But I got to say, in that conference back in 2018, Black Lives Matter was there in the room, and it was a key moment to rethinking our international work. Fast forward, however, at that time, Arts Council of Wales were resetting how we were thinking about the arts, prioritising diversity and equalities on the same par as developing the arts, and saying that no longer will we accept that one is more important than the others. And that was a seismic shift in terms of how the arts are funded, because working in this world, you realise that you can do the bit that you can do, but you've also got to chip away at the injustices that are in the system all around you. And, you know, even in my whole lifetime, I don't think I'll be able to stop doing that. But the bits that we can, we will. One thing that happened at that point as well, I'd say, was that there was this recognition about that we've got a roadmap, but it wasn't really tested and it wasn't really brought to the fore. And that was the Wellbeing of the Future Generations Act. It took the global pandemic for a cross-sector in Wales to go, hang on, this is an important piece of legislation that sort of brings together these global challenges that were brought to the fore, not just COVID, not just Brexit, which obviously had brought up voices of discontent in communities throughout the UK, but in particular, and shocked Wales that Wales voted to leave the European Union. So conversations with communities were already taking place in that context. of course, it did take the headlines of the murder of George Floyd for the Black Lives Matter consciousness, which I'm not going to talk about because I know Andrew is much more better placed than me to do so. But I think that did bring so much to the consciousness of decision makers, and rightly being challenged, as indeed I would hasten to add, has the We Shall Not Be Removed campaign for the rights for people with disabilities, and some people who need us to raise our voices more than ever. But obviously also the question around intersectionality, and what does that mean and look like in Wales? As somebody who grew up in Northwest Wales, I didn't speak English until I was 7. So speaking English when I was 16 was still a little bit of a stutter, and it still is to this day, even though I now am a linguist and I learned other languages. So I bring to this conversation, having lived overseas as well, the sort of, that expat experience that somebody was talking about this morning, about there's no difference between people who are living in different places to that expat thing. And it grinds on me, this idea that there's this lesser person living in somebody else's country. And if you're working towards some, greater government organization, you are somehow bigger than others. That to me is something of the past. Going back to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, because I do think this is our roadmap. What I invite you today to think about is that the 7 goals, and if you're not familiar with them, I'll put some in the chat. I invite you to think about this as the framework for all the inequalities, the climate emergency, the economic hardship, the health of not just the nation, but also the global responsibility, the cultural and linguistic rights that come with that. And I invite you to think of that as something that can help us all to work together across sectors, and to be something that is as outward looking as it is inward looking, because without looking out, Wales will be insular, and the voices, the international voices in Wales have never, ever been more important. And I would add, never have there been so much opportunity for those voices to be heard at last. I have a lot more to say, but I will finish off with this and hand over to Andrew, and if there's any questions and things I can pick up on, I would love to carry on with this conversation. But in essence, what I'm thinking about and what I'm talking about in my daily conversation is this idea of cultural well-being. It's more than health, it's more than the economy, it's more than all the equalities and culture, but it's everything put together. Just as a sort of an addendum, if I may, Andrew, before I hand over, just to pick up on the conversation that Jenny and Natasha had, just to give you some snippets of the projects that we've managed to fund, even at a time of pandemic. So headline act for us next week in the showcase in Wales' showcase in Celtic Connections and Showcase Scotland in Glasgow is Infamity Coyote, who we have funded through International Opportunities Fund recently to develop a collaboration with Art et Culture in Guinea to explore and document the Balathon beginnings and stories. So from the legends through to what's the practices today. And that is part of what will be on Showcase next week. And as we're reimagining our place in the world, we should all be reimagining our identities and how that can be more inclusive and more embracing of the diverse identities that we have, not just in Wales, but internationally. I'd love to talk more about this, but I'm going to pause now to hand over to Andrew.
No problem, Eluned. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I think me and Eluned have discussed about not losing sight of the international element and how do we reimagine what international means now in the context where we are, post-pandemic, post BLM, post just this rise in social consciousness where we're, as Eluned mentioned, inward looking and outward looking. These are some of the questions that we ask ourselves as an organization, and I think us as a staff also try to ask ourselves as individuals too. I've been at the Arts Council for quite a short period of time. I started in April last year as the agent for change, and my background is, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. But kind of prior to joining the Arts Council, And currently, I'm still the main organizer for the Black Lives Movement in my area here in Wales, which is Gwent, predominantly in the Newport area where I'm from. So for me, coming into this job after, months and almost a year really of activism, had me in a particular headspace and approaching the job from a particular perspective of being on the ground, of the kind of energy that was fueling the movement out of tragedy in a sense. And sometimes it's weird to analyze and talk about the situation, because the starting point was something so tragic, and so profound that it's difficult sometimes to put it into words. And I think when I stepped into the Arts Council and I kind of looked at the work that had to be done, I spent several months just in conversation, just talking to people across Wales, different artists, different arts organizations, activists, community organizations, to get a sense of what was needed and how we were best placed to serve the people. And I think the Arts Council has been on a journey of real soul searching and really trying to figure out how we can be best placed to serve communities across Wales. And communities, I say that in the broader sense, because it cuts across multiple lines, whether we look at communities from a racialized lens or neurodiversity or LGBTQ, or what's really kind of prominent in Wales is also geography. All of these intersections are at play at all times, and we are somewhat in the middle. And I think we've reached a position where we know and understand that we shouldn't be the sole authority to decide what is culture and what is art. And we're now trying to figure out ways to democratize our structures and our systems to ensure, as Jenny kind of preempted earlier, that sense of cultural democracy. What is cultural democracy? The opportunity to realize what one wants to realize, having the actual opportunity to do something in combination with the resources. And that is what cultural democracy is, the ability for you to express your culture, whatever culture means to you. Because again, sometimes we have very solid, defined definitions of culture. But, I come from a background that people may describe as non-traditional. Some of the ways I learned culture or define what culture meant to me were probably ways people don't even understand or think about culture in that way. For me, sometimes culture was just being stood outside a barbershop in my area with all my friends, aimlessly, but we're talking, we're soaking everything in. That to me is also culture. In the same way we look at things that are more highbrow, museums, cultural institutions. There is no hierarchy here, or there shouldn't be, where one type of culture or one approach of culture, one engagement with culture is platformed over another or put up while everything else is down. We're trying to work to create a system that is predicated on equity and democracy and horizontal structures of working, and not just horizontal structures of working. When we then talk about collaboration and community work, historically speaking, there's been an extractive approach. Organizations and institutions go into communities with preconceived notions of what those communities need or the kind of work and art that they want to see, and they come and impose that upon them. They work with communities for a certain period of time and they disappear. And many of the times those communities are never re-engaged with. They're never checked on, and there's no legacy or lasting sustainability of a project. And that's what needs to shift. We need to move to non-extractive ways of working where there's mutual learning and reciprocity. The Arts Council don't have all the answers. And really the magic happens when we create ways of working and practices that enable a shared learning process, that enable a mutuality and a reciprocity where I'm gaining as much as you're gaining. And how we do that really is the magic question, because I feel like we as a society are at a position where we know the problems, we know the issues, we can identify where we want to reach. We can identify the radical steps that is going to take us to a destination that's a lot better than our current situation. But the difficulty is that middle part, is the work, the action, the conversation, the awareness is one thing, and it's always going to be important. We always have to talk about these things. And that's I think one of the main benefits of the social movements that have been spawned in the last 2 years, is that they've brought these conversations right to your doorstep. It's unavoidable now. if you want to be in a position where you're an equitable democratic institution, you have to have these conversations, no matter how painful, no matter how challenging. But we have to be candid, and we have to be honest, and we have to be transparent. But once those conversations are had, then is where's the work? Where does the work lie? And as someone asks, who sets those agendas? Where is the onus? Should it be, again, those top-down approaches? Because I would argue against that. I think it has to be a horizontal approach, and if even at times it has to even be a bottom-up approach, because those grassroots organizations, those people really on the ground, is an agility and a malleability to them that institutions like ours can hear and can learn from. And then when we start then taking this into a global context, we start getting different kind of conversations, because I think the strength of any movement, whether social or otherwise, is his ability to connect across borders. And coming from a background of activism, that is one of the key things in the tradition and history of Black activism, is those activists who were able to progress their movement beyond lines. Malcolm X eventually understood that he had to go to Africa and build those Pan-African connections, because he understood the strength of those intercontinental connections because of that shared experience. And I think there's a shared experience of being in the diaspora, but there's also just a shared experience of culture across the world. And I think once institutions start to adopt that kind of global perspective, and not in a way that echoes of colonization, but in a way that echoes of connectivity, of, as I said, shared learning, mutual understanding, of platforming, of making people have the kind of infrastructure to express their culture in a way that they decide and see fit, where we just facilitate and support it. That's the position that I believe we need to reach as an organization, as a funding body, is where we enable people and facilitate people to express culture in any way they see fit, in any way that makes sense to them and that's relevant to them. So I think that's the work, and how we get there is why we're here today, is why me and Eluned and Jenny and everyone else is here, to have these conversations, to listen and to take this on board and take this learning back to the powers that be, to the people that really need to hear this, because in a sense, we're all the converted here. We know what needs to be done. We're here for a reason, but how do we bring other people along on that journey? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves.
I think maybe, Julian, did you want to come in with some of the questions?
Yay, hello. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We don't have a lot of time, and we are going to move you both to a little discussion table so that people can carry on discussing these things. I think, Eluned, are you gagging to answer one of these questions?
Yes, I'm curious about the question about social oblivion, and I think it may be what I'm thinking about social amnesia, but it may not be one and the same. So I don't know if somebody could explain what is thought by who was that, Julian?
So is that Gian? Eluned, do you think art is going to break the social oblivion both in Wales and Africa? It would be amazing if something could break the social oblivion, although I'm not sure what it is, but it doesn't sound fun.
Maybe I could add a little bit, Julian, to the conversations to tease out the conversations, which this sort of speaks to me, which is, there's a moment in time at the moment where people are coming, that are recognizing injustices of all types and are having to face a lot of truths and a lot of, sort of willful amnesia, if you like it. It's a way where we decide that, but that wasn't intentional and that was then, and there's all sorts of justifications that are given to cultural behavior practices, which some are local, some are global. But, I think there are a lot of conversations to be had in Wales around, the dichotomy, or how I see it, and not everyone will share my view, obviously, but this dichotomy of having a small minority culture within a bigger imperial structure that is changing in itself, and then having a conversation around justice and decolonization. I mean, and there was a moment this morning when I just thought, wow, that just said it all, where Jean Samuel was talking about people, you know, when he was exhibiting his work for the first time in Bangor, and somebody came up and said, well, if you want Welsh people to like it, you need to make it more like Cyffin Williams, which I was just wanting to jump in on the conversation, say, no, that is not everyone in Wales. And actually, a lot of the young contemporary artists in Wales will be facing the same challenges. So this, you know, for me, there's an intergenerational change that's happening as well, which is not necessarily just in a locality anymore, because we're digital and we work differently. So I shall just put that thought to that question, and apologies, Byd-eang, if I've got it totally wrong.
Yep, we will find out, hopefully, a little bit more. We do have there's a question also from Claire, which maybe we can briefly go to Andrew and Eluned. As Claire says, great to discuss the FGW Act, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act. Globally responsible is the least understood and least enacted of the goals. So there's 7 goals in that act. Are the arts a vehicle to increasing knowledge and action? So can we start with you, Andrew?
Yeah, great question. I think fundamentally the quick answer is yes. I think art has always been, perhaps I would argue, the most powerful tool for knowledge and action, because it sends a message in a way that is almost universal in whatever kind of whatever social category we think of or geographical lines. Everybody has at least a base understanding of the arts. So I think, and if we look at history, arts has always been a useful tool for resistance and for, as you said, that knowledge spreading. So I think fundamentally the arts are the best tool, because it's a way that makes sometimes what can be traumatic or really hard hitting or just challenging messages and notions palatable, in a sense, because it's easier sometimes to consume art than it is to consume, you know, information. It's a way that you can cater art to a 3-year-old in the same way you can cater art to an 8-year-old, to someone who is black and disabled, to someone who is white and part of the LGBTQ. So there's a way that art can be kind of contextualized in a way that I don't think many other things can. So I think the arts are the most powerful tool to increase in knowledge and action. And I think in terms of why globally responsible is the least understood is because of a proximity thing. We live in a society that obviously finds it easier to deal with things that are on their doorstep and that are in front of them. So for a lot of people, their everyday reality is not global, or the global is not in their everyday reality. So it makes it very difficult sometimes then to kind of fathom and imagine. And again, that's the kind of the negativities and the detriment of the kind of society we live in. Really, I refer to capitalism here, is that it kind of warps your imagination in a sense. And I think that has a role to play in that the everyday person sometimes is just not thinking in a global context, which means it's, you know, the responsibility of people to bring those global conversations to people. And again, that's why I think that was the strength of the resurgence of BLM after the death of George Floyd, is that it was completely global. It brought everyone across the world connected under this common issue, because it's a human issue. It's not a racial issue. It's social justice is about humanity first and foremost. So again, we need to get to the essence of things, and global responsibility is about humanity. We have a global responsibility. And I think it's about how we kind of reframe and reshape those conversations.
Yeah, thank you. And it's interesting to reflect as well that the globally responsible Wales goal was not one that the Welsh government drafted into that legislation, and they didn't want it in there. That goal was forced on them by civil society, by campaigners, by, you know, everybody from activists to bishops got together and said, well, sustainable development isn't sustainable development if it stops at the borders of Wales. But Eluned, final little wrap up, and then we'll have to move to our table, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that, Julian. And also, I don't think culture and language was wanted to be in there either originally. I mean, I know it wasn't because we wrote the amendments that put it in. So, you know, and the history of culture being left out of sustainable development is ridiculous in my view. I mean, even to the extent in COP26, when we were up in COP, it was like, you know, you had to have people like Brian Eno putting it on the agenda. And it is, you know, and there's a great organisation in Scotland called Creative Carbon Scotland who run with climate needs culture. And, you know, by bringing these two sectors together, so the two last two goals in the 7 in Wales, which is essentially what we're probably doing today to an extent, is the way forward for sure. We are changing our way of measuring how we're working internationally against the 7 goals. We're just starting on a piece of work at the moment, and we would love to hear more from people in that respect. So yeah, thank you for today, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Kath, you're going to guide us towards the next session, but I'd like to thank everybody who contributed to that session so far. It was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. You know, thank you very much to Jenny and Natasha. That was really informative. And Eluned and Andrew, you just blew my mind. So really looking forward to carry on this conversation with you all. Thank you very much. We have just published a poll. It's on the right-hand side now. So the poll is saying, would you like to be involved in future discussions on decolonising the arts? We're looking forward to working with Andrew and Eluned again for the, it's published. I don't think, do we need to publish? Okay. We're going to be speaking to them again in the future and hopefully putting on a similar event, so that if you are interested in that, by clicking yes on the poll, we will then be able to capture your information and get in touch with you when that event happens. So if you are interested in future discussions, then please do take part in the poll. So this conversation is not over. We want to hear your views, and we're interested in having a wider discussion. So we have 20 minutes before the next session. In a second, I'm going to close the session and we're going to go into a breakout room. The breakout room is called, Julian, you're going to remind me what the breakout room is called. Debrief.
Main stage debrief.
Thank you. It's called the main stage debrief. So you join on that table, and Eluned and Andrew and myself will be there, and you'll be able to join us. And I'm sure Jenny and Natasha will be there too. You'll be able to join us to discuss all of the many issues that have come up today. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And we will see you in the breakout room in 2 minutes. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.